So hi, I'm Ben Hurst. I'm the editor-in-chief here at the Phoniex magazine. Basically, in short, the Phoniex magazine is the literary arts magazine on campus. So we've been around for about 60 years. Basically what we do, in short, is that we give people an outlet, whether it be artists or writers. We give each of these people an outlet to submit their pieces and publish them, which I always tell people is important because you need, as an artist, you need that first experience of publishing. So whether it be in the gallery that we'll talk about a little, or it be in the print magazine, because being an artist, that first taste of it, that taste of success, whether it be just at the college, or it doesn't have to be straight for a big magazine like the New Yorker. I mean, we had big authors, like Cormac Mccarthy, for example. Cormac McCarthy, his first piece that he ever published was in the Phoniex, in our second ever Just the Phoniex issue. So preface that by saying, the Phoniex used to be the Tennessean, which along with the Daily Beacon would be, we would post or publish art pieces in the magazine along with other news. So that would just give people a chance just to pick something up, kind of like a newspaper. But we decided years ago that it would be better to separate them. Well, not we, not me, but people at the time. They decided that the Phoniex needed to be its own because art is so important and it's so much different than news. We kind of talk about in art classes that the news gives you the straight up. News tells you what's happening. But art gives you that perspective of how people see the news, more so than the interviews, because the interviews you can just explain to people what's going on and how they feel about it particularly. But with art, you kind of get the multiple perspectives. And leading into that, 2020, the year that's going to be known in textbooks as the year of the pandemic, we decided this year that that's what we're going to focus on. So this upcoming magazine, what is the gallery? So the gallery is named The Walk Through the Magazine. The magazine this year, our theme for submissions and what we kind of wanted to promote people to submit was stuff that they wrote or created in 2020. Not just quarantine related, it could be the Black Lives Matter movement, which was front and center of this year as well, which we'll kind of talk about in Zoe's pieces over here. But yeah, that's kind of what we were looking for, was something to show people at the time of, hey, this was all happening, but at the same time, we were still creating. People are still writing pieces, they're still creating art. Just because, as Sarah mentions in her article that we published this week, that it was kind of, it all just happened. And short, crap hit the fan. And before we knew it, our entire life was switched upside down. We couldn't even go get a coffee like we used to. We can't even sit outside anymore like we used to. And in that vein, a lot of these pieces that you'll see and that we'll walk through kind of inherit that. They envelop that feeling. So we chose Zoe's pieces because it was kind of like the Warhol. So Zoe's piece, she submitted a bunch of pieces with different colors and basically this same object, this same subject matter. And we thought it was important because you kind of see the symbolic of it, the symbolism of it. You have life before 2020, whether it be something as simple as a milk jug, because it highlights that it was the simple things in life that we lost in 2020. And then you see it's crushed, so you see the complete change. It's the same picture, but yet holding it up as the normal was completely crushed within a few months. And so we put this here just so it could brighten up. So we actually set this up in a certain way and themes on each wall. When you first walk in, out here, we'll go out there after this is done, just because there were people out there. But Sarah's piece on the wall, Eye Roll, is going to be the cover of this next magazine because we wanted to focus on the student aspect of it. And so you walk in and you see that, and then you come in here and then you first turn to the left and you see Zoe's pieces, which is kind of highlighting what the rest of it's about, is that you have the normal and then you have the crushed or the completely changed. And then going on over here, we kind of wanted to focus on the theme of just like the color pattern. So we have the black and white image, we have Michael's piece, and then we also have Sierra's pieces, which is the black background, and then the Black Lives Matter movement kind of highlighted front and center there. But first, Greyhound. Greyhounds, as we know, are kind of like the gateway. They're kind of the 21st century version of the train station. So something where you can go, and you see it's a completely empty parking lot. And so all of our lives were completely evolved around transition or movement in any way. Transportation in general was completely interrupted. I mean, you couldn't even go on an airplane anymore, and that's where Greyhound, this image was so important because it's completely empty. Now, Greyhounds aren't really in use as popular right now, but it's kind of this symbolism of, changing, of no longer being able to leave. You're forced into this quarantine. And so moving on to Michael's piece. So Michael actually just submitted the poem, but the good thing about the Phoniex is that you might just submit a poem, but if we know you and we know that you've submitted pieces before and you are a good artist, we will still, if possible, reach out and try to add something to it. So Michael just submitted the poem, but we knew Michael was a good artist, and so we asked him, hey, if he would create a piece for it. And so for in the magazine, this will just go right on top of this. And so he has his own background for the piece, and so it kind of gives it this more developed feel of having the art and then also having the writing as well. So next up, we have Sierra's pieces. Sierra's pieces are powerful. When you first look at it, you see the contrast of the black background and then this African-American woman's face who's completely painted up, and her face paint, and it highlights this conflict. You have this very lightly painted, very loud colors painting, and then on the background you have this contrast of, and so it makes you think of, you're focusing on the face, but then you're questioning of why the background, why is it so contrasting? And a part of that is highlighting both of the beauty of the community, and then also at the same time you have this, which is so much the opposite, because she's serious, and then now she's smiling, her mouth is open, so it's hard to explain, but you get this feeling from it, and this feeling from these two images kind of highlights another important part of the Phoniex, which I talked about in our reception that we had last week, which is value. When you work in an arts magazine, you have the problem, not the problem, but the job of placing value on art, which then your next question is, how do you value art? There have been articles of thousands of pages written on how you value something. Some people believe that it's supposed to be universal, so you should be able to look at a piece and enjoy it now as much as you do 100 years later. Look at Shakespeare, for example. He's a good example of that, universal. Other people is the feeling you get from it, which is kind of the way I value art, is what do I feel when I look at these pieces? Of course, these art pieces were chosen from our previous art editor, Zoe. They were at the Phoniex for a while, and they had a very good perspective on art. And so they picked these pieces because, like I mentioned, they highlight the two contrasts. And then you have this completely different piece, which Sierra also submitted. And it's right in the middle of these two contrasting, and then right in the middle you can see the calmness, the serenity that you feel from it. And that's where the value came in. She felt the power of these two pieces in coordination with this. So whenever you submit to the Phoniex, you could submit 50 pieces, and we could accept 50 pieces, but we could also just accept one, and that's not to place the value on one above the others, but it's more so of what we thought would A, work best with the magazine that we're creating this year, and B, what we felt, or C, a value that is completely different than what I'm telling you right now. So it changes. So I tell people that just because you submit something and you don't get accepted, that doesn't mean that your art wasn't good. It just means that unfortunately, part of the publishing industry and the printing industry is that not every piece will be accepted, but if anything, it gets your name. It gets your name out there. Look at Michael, like I mentioned earlier. Michael submitted pieces before who weren't accepted, but we knew Michael was an artist. And we knew we accepted this piece, and we knew, hey, Michael, you're great. Can you create a piece for this? We think you would work great. And so that's what happens. And so Sierra, she sends all three of her pieces, all three are accepted, and yeah, we'll move on. So this next piece is Life. This is actually by Sarah, who has actually created eye roll which we talked about earlier, which is at the front. Again, it's the same thing that we talked about with the milk cartons. It is a very brightly colored, she talks about in her interview that we just had, that she was just driving through Chattanooga, and surprisingly she sees a building with life on it, which is completely getting destroyed, and it seems almost too perfect. It seems perfect from what we're trying to accomplish here in the magazine this year, and what we've all experienced in 2020 as well. Just because life is literally crumbling. And then on the next one we have After Virtual Hours by Emma Hudson. Emma is the editor-in-chief of the Honey magazine, which is another important part of the student media. She's also the director of the Creative Writing Club. All these are the things. But she wrote this piece called After Virtual Hours, which talks about the transition between life of being a student in a room to where you go to college to experience these classes with students who are to feed off the energy of other students. So Zoom, in all its greatness, that gave us an opportunity to still go to college during a pandemic, we also lose that feeling that we get. Being in English classes, for me particularly, the best part about going to class is to talk to other people and feeling the vibe in the room, because when you walk in a room, you can tell whether today is going to be just a nice class where we're just reading and the professor's going to lead the discussion, or there's only going to be other days where you're like, okay, today's the day that people are going to interact and we're going to be able to participate and have a livelier discussion than we do in other classes. And that's what Emma's piece kind of talks about. And then over here, we also moved over here, we wanted to highlight Lauren Farkas's pieces, because Lauren's pieces are not in the same vein as 2020 as what we were looking for, but they also highlight that just because we send people a theme to submit something for, or we just send people a theme for them to what we're looking for, that doesn't mean just because it doesn't match, doesn't mean you still can't submit. Because if it's a good piece and we feel something, we're still going to accept it. Back to the value. Value doesn't come from how well you click the boxes off. This isn't an assignment. These are simply pieces that people made, and they said, hey, I want somebody to check this out, and I want more people to experience it, and that's where we come in. We get more people to experience your art. In this corner, we set Aslan's pieces, Aslan's prose, meditations on the words that start with the letter F. That's going to be our prose piece for this semester. This upcoming magazine is going to be a double, which means that it's going to be from pieces from the fall and spring semester. Mostly because being in Zoom and not being on campus, not many people are remembering to submit, which is okay, we have enough stuff going on right now, and so we decided to make it a double just to make it more special if we can. But yeah, his piece will be the prose from the fall semester. And then going on, Allie, Carpenter's perception of Nightfall kind of talks about just the stress, the anxiety of being a citizen in the pandemic society. You get this feeling when you read it of like more, the yearning for something more, which we can all understand and relate to, because I know for me personally, staying in my apartment, you yearn for the days where you could just go leave and go get a coffee, or something as simple as going to the mall, it's just these minute things or arbitrary things that were nothing, that we never really thought of until we actually thought about it. But yeah, going on to Lauren's pieces. Lauren's pieces are unique because she actually used kudzu to create the pieces. This one right here in the middle, she focused on the environmental aspect of it. So this is actually 10 days after listening. So what she would do is she would basically just set up the pieces, and then they would just decompose. And then there would be no trace of it except for the photos. And that was the beauty. That was what she wanted to focus on. And she talks about when she submitted the pieces that she wanted the environmental aspect to be in the front of it, that you can still create art without destroying the environment, which is sometimes we can sometimes forget about. Like I said, in 2020, we hadn't really thought about the environment too much, except until after we just released a piece called The 21st Century's Relevance, or the Starry Night's 21st Century Relevance, where Sadie, our next editor-in-chief, talks about basically that the environment has shifted between when we started in Corona, where there was pollution everywhere, until now, where after manufacturing went down and less cars on the road, you can see the night again. The same Starry Night that Van Gogh painted in the 19th century. And so these pieces over here, as you're saying, the theme is not directly related to 2020 or our submission calls, but they're still important, because even creating something in 2020, that doesn't mean you actually have to think about it all the time. Because sometimes the best thing to do during the time of a major world event is creating art that doesn't make you think about it. Because there's a theory in reading that we read to escape. We all had that feeling when we first read a young adult fiction novel like Harry Potter. I mean, Harry Potter had nothing to do at the time when we were reading it to deal with our daily lives of going to high school or going to middle school. But it just let us escape a world different. And that's what these pieces do. These pieces give us a chance to escape. For a moment, it could be even for more of a moment. It could just be the time that you're looking at the piece and you blink and you move on. But that moment of not thinking about what is going on in 2020 is still a part of 2020. Just because it's what we're feeling at the time. You know, we accepted these in that year. They made these pieces in that year, and they're still valuable. That's what I'm trying to basically say again, is the feeling again from it. The next pieces on this wall are from our previous art editor, who actually accepted all these other pieces. I know they were a great artist, and they worked at the Phoniex for a while. And to kind of counteract the lesser submissions, being an art magazine, everyone in there is an artist. And sometimes the best artists are the ones that you just kind of almost forget that they're there. There's so much in your face that you almost forget how talented they are. And that was how it was with Zoe, was that we previously in the Phoniex, we'd actually never printed an editor's work in the magazine. But with 2020, with so much change, I figured at the time that with so much change, you might as well change some rules too. So in this pieces, Zoe talks about how she wanted to basically compile all of the work that she had, all the photographs and stuff that she created, and to place them into one building, just to kind of highlight that all of their lives in one room, or in one house. And then with the quilt, this one is, I can't tell you honestly. This one, I cannot tell you why it's so striking, but sometimes the best ones are the ones that you can't describe why you feel it. You don't have to have a paragraph-long explanation of why each one is important or why each one is valuable, but sometimes it's just the piece itself. Not every piece in here has to change your life. And you come to an art gallery just to look at art as a whole, which kind of relates back to why we did the gallery in the first place. So we did the walkthrough, we did this gallery, which I mentioned is the name is the Walk Through the Magazine, because a gallery and a magazine are very similar in a bunch of ways. The magazine itself publishes all the pieces into one convenient place, which is on a book. The gallery is much in the same in the fact that you walk in and you experience them all as a whole. So each piece is independent, but then it also becomes one. It becomes the Phoniex. The print magazines are important because it highlights that each piece is individual, but at the same time, it's a community. The Phoniex is more than just the people you submit to get your work published. It's to be a part of a community of artists who were submitted and published and printed in the magazine, and you become a part of history, because we'll always have these print magazines. I have stacks in my office of magazines ever since we began. And so whenever you're 40 or 50 years down the road, whenever you're thinking about your time at UT, you can have this magazine, or sometimes you can just look. We get emails all the time from people who submitted in the 70s and 80s that got printed, and they email me and ask for that magazine, and I go through the stacks, and if I have an extra copy, I send them your way. If not, I just take a picture of it and I send it to them, because you get to experience what you were feeling at the time when you created the piece. So Sarah's piece, Eye Roll. It's going to be the cover of the next magazine. I mentioned it briefly because it's the student's life in the life of coronavirus. But she talks about in her interview that it was an outtake. She was taking pictures for graduation during the pandemic of when life was just now falling apart. And when you look at that piece, you can kind of see that we are still an arts magazine, but we're an arts magazine fueled by students. And so whenever you choose the cover piece for a magazine, you have to think of a couple things. Especially being an arts magazine on campus, you have to think of what you're looking to achieve in the rest of the magazine, because that piece is the first piece that someone sees. And so there's this theory that frames the rest of the magazine. So we chose that piece because we wanted to frame it in the fact that it is coronavirus. And there has been a lot of change, and when you see it, you kind of get this like odd feeling because her eyes are rolled back in the back of her head. It's like this ghostly image. And so you want that feeling that you catch, that eye popping. In the journal, we call that in journalistic writing, it's called the hook. So you want somebody to hook their eyes when they first read it or they first see the magazine. And so we chose that one because we wanted somebody to see it and be like, wow, that's a crazy, cool piece. Let's pick it up. My year at UT, as the editor, I wanted people to get to know us more than the Phoniex, but the people behind the Phoniex. And so this year, we wanted to do the gallery, and then after this, we'll be getting this up every year. So this gallery will be up, not these same pieces, obviously, but the same format every year in the same gallery. Maybe a different time, but it will be an annual thing, just for people to experience. It's kind of like a sneak peek, in a way, of showing people that we are still here, and that you give them a chance to see what other pieces are accepted.